So in this video, I want to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to help you plan your next trip. And I sort of stumbled across this during a trip last summer that my family took to Denmark. ChatGPT was still pretty new, and I was sort of just playing around with it. And one of the things I wanted to sort of see is whether it could sort of make suggestions for things that we could do. Now, obviously, there's lots of stuff online with all sorts of tourist advice. If you're going to a country, you want to know the top 10 locations that you got to see, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I thought ChatGPT did really, really well, and which I sort of stumbled across in my playing around with it, is that it's really, really good at giving you specific suggestions for what you might want to do based on who you are, who your family is, and where you're going to be going. And one of the things that really struck me about this was we had sort of planned out the sort of big hits of our Denmark trip. We were going to go to Tivoli in Copenhagen. We were going to go to Legoland in Billund. And then after we'd been to Legoland in Billund, we had this drive up to Aalborg in the north of Denmark. And there were certain things that we knew we wanted to see once we got up there. There's this sort of northern tip of Denmark that kind of is pretty well known, and then we were going to make our way back down this way. But I didn't want to just drive along kind of the busiest highway and just get there as fast as we could, because it was only 2 hours away. Denmark's not a very big country, so I don't have the exact prompt that I had from back then, but I basically said, I'm traveling with two teenage boys. We're driving from Berlin to Aalborg. Can you let me know the most scenic, interesting way to go between those two places, and anything kind of cool that we can maybe see along the way. And it provided a very detailed itinerary of where we could go. And one of the things that it suggested is that we go to Brand, which is this little town just north of Billund. And the reason it suggested is that it said it has a cool street art festival every year. And I had not come across any mention of Brand in any of my research at all when we were sort of planning our trip to Denmark, but it was one of the kind of coolest places that we went to. It's this town that's absolutely full of these amazing murals on pretty much every single building in town. And then every year they have artists come and do artwork on the ground, and a lot of it's this kind of cool sort of 3D artwork, so that when you take a picture of it, it actually looks 3D and you can stand on it and all that kind of stuff. And my eldest son is really, really into street art, and he just absolutely loved it. It was just how we just had a complete blast at this place, and we never, ever would have gone to Brand if it wasn't for ChatGPT. So I think in particular, if you're the kind of person that maybe doesn't love going to the busiest, tourist traps of where you're going to, or you have a particular sort of passion that you're really interested in, you really love food, you really love nature walks, things like that, I think ChatGPT can actually be incredibly powerful at kind of surfacing those suggestions, which would be quite hard to find kind of going through the typical top 10, top 20 lists of things that you want to do. And so to experiment with this a little bit further, I was sort of thinking, well, how can I know that the suggestions that ChatGPT is giving me are actually really good and maybe are a little bit off the beaten trail? And I decided to use where I live. So I live near Vancouver. Vancouver's a big tourist destination. And I sort of tried to think of a few little prompts that I could ask ChatGPT about Vancouver and see whether I agree with what it's suggesting. I mean, I've been here for many decades now. I know the area pretty well. If you were to sit down with me and say, what should we do? And you told me a little bit about what you're looking for, I could give you good advice, but could ChatGPT do the same? So I'm going to show you a few of these prompts, and I'll kind of give you some feedback on how I think it did. But the main takeaway is it does a pretty good job. So if you've got little kids, there's often little kids that are really, really into trains. So let's say, I'm going to be visiting the Vancouver area this summer. I have a little boy who's really into trains. What are some cool things we could do? Okay, and the first suggestion, which is really quite off the beaten path, is the West Coast Railway Heritage Park, which is in Squamish. And Squamish is actually a bit of a distance from Vancouver. It's at least an hour away. Let me just see exactly. It's sort of on the way to Whistler, which is a sort of a famous skiing area. So it's about an hour and a half away. So not an obvious choice when you're typing in Vancouver. But I can tell you that it's pretty cool. I've been there with my kid when he was really into trains. They've got all these full-size trains. They've got a little miniature train. So a really good suggestion that, maybe wouldn't, first kind of come up on your mind. The Rocky Mountaineer Station, also kind of a cool place. The miniature train at Stanley Park, you probably would have come across that one anyways. Going on SkyTrain is an interesting one. So Vancouver basically has a series of subways, but they're in most cases elevated, and so they're actually quite beautiful views of the city as you ride along them. So that's kind of a cool, cheap idea that you could do with someone that really liked trains. And then number 5, which I would actually put higher, because one of my favorite spots, but again, definitely off the beaten path, is the Burnaby Central Railway, which again is a little bit outside of Vancouver, but these absolutely amazing model trains that you get to sit on and ride. These old guys that love working on their model trains. A really cool place. One of our favorite places when we were growing up with the kids when they were little. And then the Heritage Railway in Cloverdale, again, a little bit off the beaten path. If you're just in the city of Vancouver, it's a bit of a ride, a bit of a transit hike. But if your kid's really, really into trains, that's something you would probably want to do. So I'd probably give this a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, especially because some of these things are things that are never going to appear on any kind of top 10 things to do when you're in Vancouver. So one of the things that our family kind of likes to do is to eat, and we're sort of not really into museums and galleries so much. We just sort of kind of like walking around cool neighborhoods. So another prompt I could put in here is, I'm going to be visiting the Vancouver area with 2 teenage boys this summer. We're not really into galleries and museums, but we love walking around cool neighborhoods and eating good food. What should we check out? Okay, first suggestions, Main Street, very funky, very cool neighborhood, not very touristy. Even suggesting some cool restaurants to check out. Peaceful Restaurant, one of our family's favorite noodle places to go to. The Acorn, one of the best vegetarian restaurants in the city. Commercial Drive, another kind of funky neighborhood. La Grata del Formaggio, you can get some really cool Italian sandwiches there. Great suggestion. Kitsilano, also really cool. Gastown, more touristy for sure, but it's flagging that for you, a bit touristy, right? And then Granville Island, definitely a bit touristy, but one of our favorite places in the city, definitely worth checking out. So maybe a 8 out of 10 on this one, pretty cool. One of the other really tricky things, obviously, when you're traveling too, is sort of keeping your costs down, right? So there's no shortage of expensive things that you can do when you're traveling, but finding some cheaper stuff to do can be a challenge. And I find ChatGPT can be quite helpful at that as well. So we'll put in a prompt here. I'm going to be visiting Vancouver this summer with my 2 teenage boys. We love to explore nature, but don't want to spend too much money. What are some cheap or free things we can do, and what are some more expensive ones that we should probably avoid? Okay, so Stanley Park, very easy to access and free to explore. Lynn Canyon Park, I would give ChatGPT really good marks on this one. It's got a suspension bridge, but it's completely free to explore, and a lot of people don't even realize it exists. So that one's a good suggestion. Walking up Grouse Mountain, good suggestion. Pacific Spirit Regional Park, Capilano River Regional Park, Queen Elizabeth Park, all good suggestions. And then things to avoid, this is probably the best one. While it's a beautiful place with treetop walks and cliff walks, the entrance fee is steep. Capilano Suspension Bridge, I think it's actually much more than $60 now. If you come to Vancouver, you're going to pass all these buses, these huge ads for Capilano Suspension Bridge. It's a cool place. I've been there with my family. We have a lot of fun, but it is extremely, extremely expensive, shockingly expensive. And Lynn Canyon is a really good free alternative because they also have a suspension bridge, not as dramatic as the one that goes across Capilano, but completely free, not nearly as crowded. So I would give this pretty high marks for kind of helping navigate. These are things that are cool, but they're really expensive. And yeah, the Vancouver Aquarium, also great. One of the best aquariums in the world probably, but really pricey. And whale watching tours, again, they can be cool, but they're going to cost you, right? So it does a really good job, I think, of saying these are things you might want to consider, but they're going to cost you. These are things that are almost as good, completely free. So a good way to kind of watch your budget as well. But one of the things, as I mentioned, sort of that kind of twigged me to this that I think ChatGPT does really, really well, which is hard to kind of piece together when you're doing your own research just from regular tourist sites, is I'm going from this place to this place. I don't want to get there the fastest. I want to get there in the way that's the most interesting, the most fun for our trip. So let's try that one. Our family is visiting the Vancouver area this summer with 2 teenage boys. We need to drive from Vancouver to Abbotsford. So it's sort of a suburb of Vancouver. It's about a couple hours outside of Vancouver. What's the most scenic, interesting way to make that drive, and what are some cool things we should check out on the way? And this again is where I can add some more instructions here. Our family isn't really into museums and galleries, but we love poking around cool neighborhoods and eating good food. Please make me an itinerary. It's okay if the trip takes all day. Okay, so it's also suggesting Granville Island, which we've already sort of established is a cool place. Kitsilano Beach, also a really nice place nearby, worth checking out. Burnaby Village Museum and Deer Lake Park, a pretty cool place. Burnaby Village Museum is kind of like one of these old kind of heritage villages. They've got a really cool carousel. That would be definitely a fun thing to do. Fort Langley, one of our favorite places in the region to check out, a really charming town with lots of cool places to eat and cool little shops and antique places to stop and stuff like that. Campbell Valley Regional Park, probably one of the best, unknown, big, nice place to go for a walk parks in the area. And then talking about, downtown Abbotsford and some of the things you can do there. So, pretty cool, and is a very different itinerary than if you were just to put in Vancouver to Abbotsford. Because if you just want, a Google Maps get from Vancouver to Abbotsford, it's going to take you right along this major highway number 1 that basically goes straight to Abbotsford. That's going to be the quickest way to go, but you're not going to see any of this cool stuff along the way. So I've been really impressed at how good of a job ChatGPT can do in kind of surfacing these sort of off the beaten track suggestions when you're going on trips, things that your particular family might really like. I mean, anyone who's traveling with a whole family, often it's kind of a bit of a balancing act, right? Like this person likes this person likes this person likes this. Like, plan me a day where everyone's going to be at least a little bit happy, right? I think that can be quite good at that. And definitely, like if you were just to sort of start typing in, what to see in Vancouver, you're going to get, Stanley Park, Vancouver Aquarium, Canada Place, 15 best things to do in Vancouver, whale watching, a lot of kind of expensive things to do. But you're going to miss some of that really cool stuff, right? So definitely something I think is worth checking out, and kind of a bit of a hidden ability of ChatGPT that I sort of stumbled across last summer and thought I would share with you folks. So hopefully this has been helpful. And yeah, that's all for now.